So who wants to talk about Week 10 of this 2017 NFL season? Apparently I do, hence why I'm doing the video entitled Week 10 Recap. Let's get after it, and let's go diving right into 4th and 10. The Seahawks beat the Cardinals last week on Thursday night, and in the process lost All-Pro corner Richard Sherman for the year to an Achilles tear. And whereas the Seahawks are sitting in pretty good shape right now in terms of the playoff race, you do have to wonder, losing an All-Pro, losing a stud out of that Legion of Boom secondary, which is so much of that team's identity, like Richard Sherman has been the past half-decade plus, you wonder how much this is going to potentially impact the Seahawks defense going forward and how this could potentially impede their ability to make it to the Super Bowl. Speaking of teams, though, that are hot, the New Orleans Saints went on the road into Buffalo this past Sunday and blew the brakes off those jokers so bad that they decided they're going to bench Tyrod Taylor. The Saints, holy hell, who saw this coming? After starting off the season 0-2, they've won 7 games in a row. Now we're not only talking about a Saints team that's thinking about the playoffs, now thinking about winning their division, they're potentially thinking about getting a first-round bye, if not home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs. Crazy. Who would have saw this before the season started? Brett Hundley got his first win as a starter for the Green Bay Packers as they went into Soldier Field and beat the Chicago Bears because, of course, the Bears are going to roll over and play dead for the Packers twice pretty much every single year. Who didn't roll over and play dead, though, were the Jacksonville Jaguars. Even though Blake Bortles late in the game tried to piss it down their legs, the Jags came back, then in overtime, picked off Phillip Rivers, and the Jaguars had a victory. One of those games where you look at them and say, this legit team, even with what they have at the quarterback position, because they can run the ball, they can play really good defense, and ultimately, they won a game that they should have lost. And that's what good teams do. I think it's time to say the Jaguars are a good team. Not a very good team, not a great team by any means, but they are at least a good team because on Sunday they beat the Chargers in a game that they should have lost. Speaking of teams that won, the Minnesota Vikings, another team sitting there at 7-2 just like the Saints, they went into Washington and beat the Redskins. Case Keenum had a big day. And the biggest story of all is Bridgewater returning to the sidelines. A little more than a year of a devastating knee injury where people were wondering if he was going to lose his leg and never be able to play again. He's back suited up on the sidelines for the Vikings as the team's number 2 quarterback. I mean, that's got to give you some warm feels in the heart. And for the Vikings, you sit there and say, okay, if Case Keenum ends up crapping out a little bit, maybe Bridgewater could come in and help us. Maybe he doesn't. But if anything else, it's see Teddy back on the sidelines, suited up, and if needed. The San Francisco 49ers finally get in the win column, beating the woeful Giants. Kyle Shanahan gets his first victory of the year, and the 49ers, while they're bad, they've at least been competitive. It was only a matter of time. They earned this victory. They deserved this victory, and at least they got off the schneid. For the Cowboys, though, not a good Sunday. The suspension of Ezekiel Elliott officially began, and they just weren't the same team. They went to shit and got blown out by the Falcons in Atlanta. The Patriots smashed the Broncos, which makes you really wonder what's going on with Denver, and not so much on the offensive side of the ball, but the defensive side of the ball. You can point to special teams, you can point to the lack of production from the offense, but this is a defense that's supposed to be elite. This is a defense that's supposed to be big time. This was a game Sunday night where they should have shown up, and they didn't. This Broncos season is quickly getting lost, and the Patriots are starting to look like a bit of a juggernaut in the AFC with not very many challengers out there to try and usurp them from the throne. You had Cam Newton on Monday night come out and have a huge day, throwing for 4 touchdowns and running for almost 100 yards as they smashed the Miami Dolphins. And when you look at Carolina, it's one of those things you trade away your, in theory, number 1 wide receiver in Kelvin Benjamin, and on Monday night, it just didn't matter. This team was clicking. Offensively, they were rolling, and they played really, really good defense. Which brings me to the big story from Week 10 as you look at it, is whereas in the AFC, to me, I look at it right now, and I see it's either the Patriots or Steelers are representing the AFC in the Super Bowl. And I may start to lean a little bit more towards the Steelers based off of what I've seen in recent weeks. In the NFC, who the hell knows what's going to happen? Because we've got a dogfight. There are many teams that look really, really good. The Eagles are leading the pack at 8-1. True. They are the team to beat at this particular moment. with the way their front four can play, the offensive balance that they have, the improvement in progression of Carson Wentz, they're legit. But the Vikings are 7-2. The Saints are 7-2 with a future first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback in Drew Brees. So in terms of quarterback advantage in that conference, they got it over everybody else. The Los Angeles Rams are 7-2 under first-year head coach Sean McVay. The Carolina Panthers are 6-3. The Seattle Seahawks, even with losing Richard Sherman, they're sitting at 6-3. The 6th seed in the NFC right now is a 6-3 former Super Bowl champion in the Seattle Seahawks. The 5th seed in the NFC is a team that has a former league MVP at quarterback and a team that made it to the Super Bowl back in the 2015 season. And that's not to mention that you still have other teams that could potentially slide into the mix, even though they're a little bit ways back right now. But looking at this playoff picture right now, the NFC has the power this year. The NFC is loaded, and this is going to be an interesting dogfight to watch the rest of the year. Now, in terms of winners and losers for the week, I look at the winners and I say the Pittsburgh Steelers. You say they barely beat Indianapolis in Indianapolis, and Indianapolis stinks. Why does that make them winners? Because this is exactly the type of game that I talk about with the Steelers. I talk about it every year when they come up to these games, where they play bad teams on the road and they struggle and they lose. See the Chicago game early on this year at Soldier Field. The Steelers lost that game, and they shouldn't have. But they did, and they have a bad history of doing that. They found a way to go into Indy after getting down early and struggling early to tie it up, go to overtime, and win it. And that's the type of thing that makes you start to wonder if the Steelers have kind of turned a corner a little bit, and they are really truly now the one major challenger to the Patriots in the AFC. I look at the Minnesota Vikings going on the road and beating the Redskins. You're sitting at 7-2. You've got Teddy Bridgewater back. Case Keenum is kind of coming into his own a little bit. The Vikings have to feel really good about themselves right now, as they should. The Atlanta Falcons, that's a big home win against, yes, you could say a depleted Cowboys offense without Ezekiel Elliott, and maybe more importantly without Tyron Smith, the all-pro left tackle. But the Falcons handled business and got the job done. They knocked the Cowboys down a notch. They bring themselves up a notch to where they don't lose that much distance in the playoff race. The Falcons are at least in the mix. In terms of the losers, the Denver Broncos. They've lost several games in a row now. What is it, like 5 games in a row, 6 games in a row, whatever the hell it is. They look terrible. They look terrible. Their offense stinks, and their defense has been atrocious the past several weeks. They've gotten blown out in back-to-back games by the Eagles and the Patriots. Now, you could say those could potentially be the 2 Super Bowl teams, and that could be true. But this is supposed to be a Super Bowl-worthy defense, and they're doing nothing. They suck, period. That's how you call it right now. The New York Jets. You're talking about a team that was going into Tampa, a Tampa team that can't really stop anybody, that has shown no real momentum. Jameis Winston's out. Mike Evans is out due to suspension. You basically let Ryan Fitzpatrick have one of the most mediocre revenge games in NFL history. And if you're the Jets, you look at it and you say that AFC playoff race is soft. Really soft. And this is the type of game that you needed to win to get to 5-5 and really put yourself in the mix. Because losing this game makes winning some of those other games look stupid, because now you've done what the Jets do, which is blow a tank job where you win too much to get that marquee pick, but you lose too much to actually make it into the playoffs. This was a must-win game for the Jets, a chance to take advantage of a wounded opponent on the road, and they failed to do so. That's a huge failure and loss for the New York Jets. And then you got to look at the Dallas Cowboys. No Ezekiel Elliott, no Tyron Smith. They go into Atlanta and they put up a whopping 7 points. There's trouble brewing in Dallas, especially if they can't stay committed to the run with Alfred Morris and other guys, especially if they have any other injuries, let's say, on their offensive line. They're in big trouble in a big way. And they might still even be in big trouble in a big way. In terms of the studs of the week, I look at Case Keenum, 309 yards passing and 4 touchdowns on the road against Washington in a pass defense for the Redskins that's kind of middle of the road, but not terrible. Case Keenum had a big day, leading the Vikings to a quality road victory. You look at Mark Ingram, 131 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns as the Saints bowled over and, more importantly, ran over the Buffalo Bills. What was it, 47-10? Who cares? They beat the brakes off them jokers. Robert Woods had 8 catches for 171 yards and 2 touchdowns as the Rams streaked to victory over the Texans. You know, Robert Woods has had a couple of really nice games back-to-back now, but in general, it's amazing when you look at the Rams and you see last year under Jeff Fisher and how lost and bad they looked. Now you get a guy that knows what the hell he's doing, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, in Sean McVay, and it's night and day. It's night and day. And then defensively, Adrian Claiborne, 6 sacks of Dak Prescott. And as much as everybody will focus on Ezekiel Elliott and his suspension, how much that impacted him, and you could say that could be true, although Alfred Morris was having some success running the ball against the Falcons, and Jason Garrett just didn't go to it enough. I think he ran like 11 times for 57 yards. You need to run the ball more because that's still your identity as a team. That's how your offense gets balanced, your defense gets rest. I mean, it just helps everything. It allows you to impose a physical will on the team. You can't sit there and just completely air it out. You can't just get away from your philosophy because Zika's not there. But more importantly, you're going to have to run the ball more, especially if Tyron Smith misses any more games. Adrian Claiborne went off for 6 sacks on him. Chaz Green got obliterated on the left side. And then what was even more ridiculous, as Chaz Green was getting obliterated, the team really didn't make an adjustment. They didn't bring any help. They didn't do anything. They didn't bring a back, a tight end. They didn't do anything to help him. They just let Chaz Green get buried out there on the left side, where he's not a natural left tackle to begin with. Adrian Claiborne joins a pretty select list of players off the top of my head that have had 6 or more sacks in a game. The single game record holder, of course, is Derek Thomas with 7. You have Fred Dean, Hall of Famer, just like Derek Thomas, who had a 6-sack game. And then somebody that's at least in the Hall of Very Good Players, Osi Umenyiora, had a 6-sack game. That's the elite type of company Adrian Claiborne joined with that 6-sack performance. That's studly. When you could be in a conversation in terms of what you did on that day is equivalent or close to it for Derek Thomas, Fred Dean, and then to a lesser degree, Osi Umenyiora, you know you've had a big day. You know you were dominant. Period. But that's the week that was in the NFL. Let me know what you thought about this week and what you think about some of the things I talked about. I'll see you later.